The East Coast oysters have become the height of sophistication in global cuisine, but there was a point in recent history which almost made them extinct.
We were taking oysters at a clip of like 20 million bushels a year, which was just completely unsustainable.
However, two cousins in Virginia have turned the industry around to make the state one of the leading producers in North America.
Back when we started, you couldn't find a Virginia oyster on the menu anywhere, and now everyone wants a Virginia oyster.
In this film, we're going to learn what exactly were the oyster wars.
People would come down from New York because New York had completely decimated its oyster population, and it would come down here trying to get oysters.
The fine art of eating oysters.
The best way is to eat it naked, as we call it. That doesn't mean Ryan takes his clothes off.
And whether the old narrative is true.
One of the other myths is whether or not they're an aphrodisiac. You tell us, I don't know.
This is the story of how two cousins resurrected the oyster industry in the East Coast of the United States. In beautiful Chesapeake Bay, Virginia, oysters have been entwined in the fabric of everyday life for centuries.
Oysters are one of the staple dishes here in Virginia and should be everywhere.
It's no small coincidence that the Chesapeake means the Great Shellfish Bay.
Here, the oysters aren't just salty, they're sweet.
It's the largest estuary in the U.S. Estuaries are where the freshwater meets saltwater. And with that, you get this incredible admix. I think it does make for a nice, sweet, clean finish that's very unique.
Meet the Croxton cousins, co-owners of the Rappahannock Oyster Company.
I'm Travis Croxton.
What do you do?
Oh, that's I'm Travis Croxton, owner of Rappahannock Oyster Company, along with my cousin.
Ryan Croxton, also owner of Rappahannock Oyster Company.
And how would you sort of describe each other?
Oh, gosh.
Completely opposite. I mean, that's a beauty of working with a family, because if it wasn't right, you'd be divorced, but no.
Well, he's 5 years younger than me, so growing up, he was just a little punk. So
now he's just old.
Now I'm just old.
Oystering is in their blood.
The company traces its roots back to at least 1899 with their great-grandfather. Our two fathers are brothers. Holidays always kind of centered like at our grandfather's house, and you go there and everyone's kind of cooking in the kitchen, but he'd be in the garage shucking oysters for you.
But when their grandfather Bill died in 1991, the business went with him.
Our grandfather told our fathers to get real jobs and not have to rely on the ups and downs of oystering.
We have oyster books that go all the way back to the early days of the oyster company, and there are just so many sad years in which they put total loss because a hurricane came through and wiped out everything. It was those kind of moments that he just didn't want his kids to have to live through.
In 2001, the cousins received a call that would lead to the resurrection of the family business.
Got the call from our dads that the leases were up for renewal. So that was kind of the pivotal moment where our dad said, do you guys want to renew them yourselves? Thinking that we'd say no, and we said yes. We didn't want to lose them because it was kind of a relic of our grandfathers, but we also had no idea how to grow oysters.
We had no infrastructure, no boats, no land, no equipment.
It was a baptism by fire for Travis and Ryan, who soon learned that the local oystering industry was in need of a different approach after centuries of exhausting the supply.
Probably its peak was in the 1890s, where we had just taken too much. We were taking oysters at a clip of like 20 million bushels a year, which was just completely unsustainable, and got to the point where they had these things called the oyster wars, where people would come down from New York because New York had completely decimated its oyster population, and it would come down here trying to get oysters. And then by the year that we started, in 2001, it was down to 23,000 bushels a year.
You couldn't find a Virginia oyster on the menu anywhere, and we knew that we'd have to experiment with something like aquaculture.
But what is aquaculture?
Well, shellfish aquaculture is taking a little baby seed from a hatchery, instead of taking it out of the wild, and growing it in a controlled way right alongside wild oysters. It's
meant to be additive. It's not meant to be extracting or taking from the wild. So the wild can continue to grow and blossom as it always would. A single oyster filters about 50 to 60 gallons of water a day. They kind of serve as the liver of the bay.
It's not just sustainable, it's restorative. One of those rare win-win-wins.
Armed with a new approach, 20 years later, the Croxtons have a thriving business. What's more, Virginia is producing more oysters than anywhere else on the East Coast.
We have 5 of our own restaurants in DC, Los Angeles, Charleston, South Carolina, Richmond, and here in Topping, Virginia. And we sell about over 200,000 oysters a week.
Which incidentally is more than the entire bay was producing in 2001 when we started. So that's a pretty big change.
It feels good to kind of be part of the resurrection of the Chesapeake Bay and restoring this industry.
They think at some point they'll get wistful about it, but for right now, it's an uphill thing. They love being the underdog.
We're at the heart of the Rappahannock River out here. That we have about 5,000 oyster cages on the bottom. We're gonna pull one up and see what's in it.
All right, so what we're picking up here are some 55 millimeters from about 2 months ago. So they should have a decent amount of growth on them.
These look pretty good. Yeah, these are really nice looking. Real deep cup. That's exactly what they're looking for at the restaurants. The cages kind of replicate the old oyster reef situation we had in the Chesapeake Bay, where just mounds of oysters grew everywhere in the water. So we get little baby fish, baby crabs. Everything uses this as a sanctuary almost.
These boys are quite the connoisseurs.
Be the only one at the table to choose. Like, actually enjoy the oyster, savor it. It's not, it's not a dare. You don't need to chase it.
The best way is to eat it naked, as we call it. That doesn't mean Ryan takes his clothes off. It just means you don't put anything on it.
If you're trying a new region or something like that, you should just have it straight raw. Because you want to be able to taste all the complexity in it. And like wine, you can grow the same grape in a million different places and it's going to taste a little bit different. I think that's the beauty of the oyster.
But the question is, who shucks best?
So Ryan is a much better oyster shucker because he's so damn slow with it to make sure everything's perfect. I just don't have the patience, I just butcher it.
I heard that oysters can change their sex. Is that true?
Yes, oysters can actually be intersex. They can change their sex from female to male and back. One of the other myths is whether or not they're an aphrodisiac. You tell us, I don't know.
But we've got 6 kids, so who knows? I don't know, maybe.
And on that note, will the kids be carrying on the legacy?
No pressure whatsoever. I got 3 that won't even eat oysters, so good luck.
But we'll see if they're interested in. If they are, then we'll make them do the hardest job first.
Cheers. All right.
I see you staring at them. Why don't you guys jump in?
Yeah, the rest of these
I
are
wanted
yours.
to.